All right, we are live. Greetings, fellow book lovers, and welcome back to another live on Colin's Corner. Today we are going to be talking a little bit about slumps, how they make us feel, how we handle them, and I've got some of my closest BookTube class of 2023 friends here with me, and I will let each of them just briefly introduce themselves. So we'll start with Caleb. You want to go ahead and start?
Yeah, hi, I'm Caleb, or Celebrity here on YouTube. I do BookTube. I talk about dark fantasy, fantasy horror, and yeah, I've been in a slump.
Who's next? What order are we going?
We'll do Laura.
Whoever, we'll go with Laura next.
I'm Laura. I'm on the channel Fantasy at Wash. I mean, I'm not on the channel. It's my channel, so I'm very tired. I mostly do fantasy. Sometimes I throw historical fiction in there. I also like to do differences between books and their shows. And I usually do those with Christopher Navo. So he's also part of the class of 2023, but he is playing D&D right now. So he is missing this, which I'm honoring him by wearing a Dungeons and Dragons sweater.
Shout out to Chris.
Exactly. The real MVP, Chris Navo.
The duo that makes up StoryTube.
Yeah.
I'm Yolanda. This is Carlos. We are StoryTube, and we talk about
Stories.
a bit of everything. Stories. Yes.
And you guys do great book tags together. They're so fun.
They are fun, actually.
Yeah, they're fun because we're really bad at them, I think, but in a funny way.
I think people like the fact that we're bad at them.
I audibly laughed a lot at your 24 rapid question one. The Friends clips were so well placed. I was like, this is so good.
I'm not. I'll be honest. We spent more time trying to figure out where to put those Friends clips than actually editing the video.
That was most of the editing process. Yeah.
I wanted.
Anyway, Colin, in honor of you, I'm wearing my Bulls hat. So thanks for having us on.
Look at that. So I was just telling everyone before I hit the live button that I didn't really have much of a plan for this. I figured that we will just I think there's a lot of people in our Discord that kind of slumped or got out of a slump around the same time, and I think Christopher Navo, not to speak illy of somebody who is not here to defend themselves, but I think he was
for him. Don't worry.
I was talking to him about this in September because he was kind of hitting that in September, and that's kind of when my life was like I didn't even have a second to breathe, but I was still trying to read, and I was like, I was like unable to empathize with where he was at because I wasn't there, and then boom, October hit, and everything. Content creation, motivation to do anything, everything I was doing last second. I wasn't reading. I wasn't enjoying what I was reading. And I was really mad that I couldn't figure out why. And so I guess the first question that I'm going to ask each of you guys is, are you currently slumping?
Do we just want to take it clockwise, I guess?
Yeah.
However, I feel like if you just have something urgent that you need to say, just
everything I say is so important.
I mean, that's true.
I think it's part of the problem. It's like, oh my God, I don't have anything urgent to say.
I'd say, yeah, I just came out of a slump. Similar to you, Colin, I just got really busy in September, October, November, and that made it hard to read. And then I just kept reading mediocre after mediocre book, and that really killed it for me. I think I had to take a break for a little bit, and I've also been in a bit of a YouTube slump, if you guys can't tell by the fact that the last time I posted was in August. Because like I was doing the same thing where like, God, I just wasn't enjoying what I was reading, and then I was thinking I gotta make a video, and I was like, God, but I don't like what I'm reading. So that was really demotivating. So I think for me, what I had to do is I just had to pull back for a little bit. I played some video games, watched some TV shows, and now I'm back to reading stuff that I like. I finally read a book that I was excited to finish, and now I've got some. Book? It was Stones of Light by Zach Argyle, which I really like.
Threadlight?
That's Threadlight, yeah. They're nice because they're very Sanderson-esque, but they're half the length. Which, as Laura probably knows from us talking, the length of fantasy is the biggest hurdle for me to overcome. So for me, I think reading like a quick book like that really helped. And now I'm reading Memories of Ice, which is long and exhausting, but really good.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is like the pressure that you put on yourself, especially now, for the general population. I feel like when we didn't have a YouTube channel, I never really had a slump. There was a period after college, like when I was doing my thesis for my master's, where I was just reading a lot of shit that I didn't want to read, that was very dry. And I stopped reading for like 4 years for pleasure, just because I would like to do anything but this.
That was
But
100%
then-
me.
Yeah,
I
and I
relate
think
so deeply.
the general population might have things like that, but I think as booktubers now, there's also like the pressure that you put yourself on for like, oh, I'm talking about this book that I'm going to read, and then I really have to read it, and I'm joining this buddy read, so I kind of have to read this, and then it becomes work. And you're like, that's part of the problem. It's just recalibrating how you approach books while having a channel as well.
And
for me.
that's definitely exactly what happened to me. Like, because I would say ever since I got back in the reading 2019, 2020 area, I didn't really have a reading slump. I maybe wouldn't read as much in a given month, but I never felt burnt out on reading. But it wasn't until I joined YouTube and I really aggressively signed up for buddy reads. And I was like, I've got to do a channel wrap up and do my TBR and then follow my TBR.
I stopped doing TBRs for that reason. When I started my channel, I did them because I was like, oh, people seem to really like TBRs. And then I realized I'm way too much of a mood reader, and people would message me being, what did you think of the book? I'm like, I haven't read it. I don't know if I'm going to read it this year. I just don't know. And I felt like I was just getting on a soapbox and lying to people. I was like, these are all the books I'm going to read, and I've read none of them. It was just letting people down over and over again.
The fear of like not following through on what you say, but then you realize real quick, and I think people commenting on your channel, you realize, well, they don't really care.
Yeah,
like it's
you
fine.
care.
Yeah, I
That's
think
the
just
thing.
being aware of that, and like, for example, we do the month of tribute things where we like pick out a selection
It's
of
so
books.
fun.
And it is fun. It's really fun, but like we try to put too many books on the list, so it's not really a TBR, and we just say we're gonna pick some of these maybe. So you keep it at a bit of a distance where you're sort of like, yeah, we're still mood reading these books, but it's not
ambiguous though.
Yeah.
You're just narrowing the selection basically. I always feel like a bit of a slump coming out of those though, like both times, just because TBRs just kill me completely. I can't, it doesn't work for me. And like you were mentioning buddy reads, I've fallen into that trap of like, I want to read this book. Somebody's like, oh, you want to read it next month? Yeah, sure. And suddenly I realize, oh, I have 4 books scheduled to read in a month. And in total, on a regular month, I might just read 4 books or 5. And then it doesn't allow enough space to read whatever you randomly want to pick up. And sometimes you just want to walk into a bookshop, buy something, go home and read it. And I really need that freedom. Yeah.
I completely agree.
The volume of reading, since I discovered BookTube, the volume that people read at really surprises me, because I do well to read a book a week. I think that's, for me, reading quite a lot. And then seeing, oh, I'm now committing to these buddy reads, and it's like 5 books this month, and that just, I feel like that's too much pressure,
I can only do like 1 a month if I'm lucky, and even then I'm usually the last to finish because I get sidetracked. And everyone's like, hey, we really want to schedule that buddy read. I'm like, sorry. Yeah, I'm the worst to do them with, really. I thought I would be really great for buddy reads because I was always that kid in school that was like super prompt and everything was early. Buddy reads, I am not that person. I'm way behind.
Also,
Yeah.
like, depends on the length of the book as well. Your buddy reading a 1,000-page book, it's got to be more than a month. You got to give me 2 months to read that thing.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. Even like a 600-page book. Like I just did a 600-page book and I was like, and it's not easy prose type thing. I was like, this is taking me a while. It's not that the prose aren't nice. They're very nice, but it's not one that I'm going to sit down and inhale in 2 sittings. It took me several weeks to get through. So yeah, there's definitely things like that. But the books that I tend to have the most slumps coming out of are the Stormlight Archive books because they're so big. And I read Words of Radiance last month and I loved it so much and immediately was like, I'm jumping. I came into my room here and was looking at the shelf and I was like, what do I want to read? And picked out like 3 different books, tried them all and did like the first chapter. And I was like, I don't want to read any of this. I just want to read Oathbringer. And then jumped into Oathbringer and was like, it's 1,200 more pages. This is a lot. And I'm like 35% through Oathbringer. Like it's been slow. So I've started like 3 other books in the meantime. So they're all kind of just hanging.
Do you all read multiple books at once or do you go?
Not usually.
I'm a big multiple book reader.
Same.
I usually have to, like, especially I think my approach with Malazan moving forward is all the Malazan books are broken into like book sections. I honestly think I'm probably going to read a section and then read a short book or like a novella or something, some sort of like palate cleanser. Because I've got ADHD real bad and that very much manifests in reading. Because if I don't feel like I've got a sense of momentum, I will just stop reading. And then again, I'm a mood reader, so sometimes I'm like, yeah, I am in the mood for Malazan, or like, I kind of want to read something scary right now. So I've usually got like a pool I pull from. And then I have my audiobook I'm listening to, which is usually unrelated or Warhammer related. So
that's the thing. I usually do 1 audiobook and 1 physical book. And if I'm really into the physical book I'm reading, I might get the audiobook of it so I can listen to it while I'm busy doing other stuff.
Yeah, I think that's because I'm not done with Sanderson yet, but I think that's the approach I'm going to take with him moving forward. I'm going to do the audiobook and the ebook. That way I can just power through them. Michael
Kramer's voice is a little bit boring, but
well, I mean, like, because we're talking about this, Michael Kramer's voice is boring, but you and I listen to audiobooks like 1.75. So
I listen to them at 2.
I've gotten that's
I've gone
too
up
much.
to like 2.2 with some of the Sanderson stuff, just because. First of all, I've gotten more so used to Michael Kramer's voice. Kate Redding's voice grates on me. I don't like it at all. And part of the problem now is that because they've narrated so many different fantasy series, I automatically associate them with a specific character in my mind. So when I hear Kate Redding's voice, I'm like, oh, she's Nynaeve from Wheel of Time. I'm like, she can't be anybody else. So when she starts doing Shallan's voice, I'm like, I can't do this. So I put it at really, really fast. So it sounds slightly different and it's more tolerable for me, which drives my husband crazy. He's like, how do you understand a single word they're saying? I'm like, you just get used to it. But
that's the first explanation of listening at that speed that I can understand because it changes the voice. And then, I understand that now. For a long time, I've just been like, oh my God, these people are insane listening to this book at 2.
I used to feel that way too, because Kyle from Read by Kyle would say, he's like, yeah, I listened to it at like 2 speed. I'm like, what? I was like, I'm lucky if I can listen to something at like 1.5 speed and understand what they're saying. And he had good advice. He was like, honestly, just sit down in a quiet room and listen to it at a certain speed for like 10 minutes, then up it, then 10 minutes, and then up it. And he goes, you just get used to it. And it's true. You really, really do. But yeah, especially if you don't automatically connect with the narrator's voice, I suggest playing with the speed because Michael Kramer, I think, sounds way better at 1.8 than he does at 1. And Kate Redding sounds tolerable at 2. So it could be an opening.
Yeah, I to answer Carlos's original question, I used to not be a guy that did a ton of books at the same time. I usually had an audio and a physical. And a lot of times at night, like when I'm tired, I will read immersively. The book that I'm reading physically, I will also listen to on audio, which kind of bleeds into like answering the audiobook question is I have like two different listening speeds. If I'm reading immersively, it's still slower than I would normally read physically without the audiobook. Like I'll probably put it at about 2 and read immersively as kind of like a leisurely
match
reading
your own
experience,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. Because for some reason, like with the audiobook and reading physically, I like retain the information a little bit better, but it's not as physically demanding, if that makes sense, if I'm really tired. But when I'm
Yeah.
just listening to an audiobook, I sit at around like 1.2, 1.3, because usually I'm doing something else also, and I'm not just focusing on the audiobook. So I have a couple of different speeds that I usually listen to audiobooks with. But audiobooks helped me get out of my slump because I was still retaining stories during my physical reading slump because I was still listening to audiobooks. And that kind of reminded me how much I love reading, even though I wasn't in the mood to like physically read as much. I was still retaining stories and I still had things that I wanted to talk about. So it kept me tethered to the idea of reading, even though I wasn't doing it physically, if that makes sense.
I think also the important thing to like say, if we're gonna talk a bit deeply about like slumps and whatever, is that it's okay to just not for a while. Like it's fine. It's okay. Like go play a video game, go watch a movie, go do something else that you enjoy. I think like I have never really stuck to just one type of thing as well. You'll notice maybe on our channel that we don't like exclusively read one genre or the same couple of genres even within a month. Like there'll always be a new genre, or a long book and a really short book, or a novella, or like I don't know, a short story, or comics. The big one, I find comics are so good to blast through. You get that sense of accomplishment. It's a bit of a brain reset, but also it's okay to just not read if you're not.
Seriously, it's so. I think part of it, when you think about what the average person reads a year, like an experienced reader, basically, they're reading like 10 to 12 books a year.
Yeah.
So when you compare that to people on BookTube, where I'd say probably the average is probably like between 40 and 80 books, somewhere in that range for most people, it's a lot, and it's okay to just not read. I go through periods where I'm like, I'm going to go play a video game this whole week. That's fine. Or I don't know if you can hear my cats fighting, but they're just chaotic back here. But like, I love TV. So I'll pick a series and like binge through it. And then I'm like, okay. And then I'll come back to a book or whatever. And like, I completely agree. I picked up a manga after Words of Radiance for the first time, and I felt so accomplished after I read it. I was like, that took me an hour and I have a sense of accomplishment. Great. And then my last book that I read, I've got it right here. It's like this long, it's 80 pages, but it's full of great information. But I was still like, great. It's, I'm done. So I can add that to my list of things that I've done and feel accomplished. But you don't have to have that feeling of accomplishment if you don't want to. You can do nothing and it's fine.
I was always kind of okay reading between 12 and 25 books a year. Before like college, before I stopped, for a couple of years, that was normal to me. That was a lot to me because it was more than 90% of people I know. Like my mother used to read a book a week, so she would try to read 52 books in a year. And that was just the thing that she wanted to do. But she didn't pressure herself to reach that all the time. So like, I think this year I wanted to push myself a bit more to read more. I don't really know why, but just to try it.
Yeah.
But I feel like I've read too much this year, and I still don't read as much as other people, you know? But it depends on the individual as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some people that are like hitting the 100 book mark by August, and I'm thinking, what else do you do? You know, I mean, I think like, okay, I've got a kid. Not everyone has kids, and that's totally fine. Like, good on you for not having kids. And, you know, like, I want to do X, Y, and Z. Like, that eats up time. You know, like, how do you, like, is this all you do? Is one of the things that I sit back and wonder sometimes. And, like, do you actually do anything else? It's just hard to comprehend sometimes, like, how people read that much in a short period of time. Like, I'm sort of like your was it your mother you said that reads yeah, like 52. So that was my goal for this year. Initially, my goal in last December was 12 books for this year, and that got surpassed really quickly until I was like, I'm gonna aim for 60 books. And then I was like, that's not going to be achievable for me this year. So maybe 52. I'm at 48 now. So I'm close. And even now I'm like, if I hit it, I hit it. If I don't, I don't. Like, it's not the end of the world. I've done really well this year. So I'm not going to freak out if I don't hit that.
Yeah. I was convinced before we started a channel, because we talked about this and like, oh, is it going to create pressure, like whatever, and I was convinced that it wouldn't. I have always had reading as my primary hobby and never really had a huge slump. I mean, sure, like sometimes it happens to everybody, but you know, not like, so I was like, no, this is not going to be an issue for me at all. I'm just going to read whatever I want. But it is like you just fall into it, like you were saying, like buddy reads and stuff, and like creating a TBR, or you set something on a video and you're like, oh no, and I have to read it.
But you don't.
But yeah, but the thing is, like I used to do the
Really
52. Yeah, like the 52 goal, like a book a week. That's what I generally would have read. Not really tracking it all that precisely, but like roughly. And this year, I decided to just challenge myself just to see if I could. So I was like, okay, a lot of people read 100 books a year or more. What if I set the goal to 100? Spoiler alert, not hitting that. But even though I had told myself I'm not really aiming to hit it, I'm just going to see how close I get, I still feel that like every time I open Goodreads and I'm like, oh, 8 books behind schedule, I get this feeling of like, oh, I'm failing at this. I'm like, I don't want to be failing at my hobby. That's ridiculous. You can't fail.
Exactly. It's meant to be fun. It's not meant to be a pressure-filled thing. And I've seen some videos that booktubers have put out and they're like, are we ruining reading with book talk and booktube and things like that? And are we making it too competitive, whereas it's supposed to be something for enjoyment? And I mean, in certain cases, like Carlos was saying, I did so much reading for my master's thesis. Like, that is a job. Like, that was literally my job for 3 years. I was like, I know that I have to do on average 400 pages of reading a day. And at the end of that, I was like, I'm okay never looking at a book ever again. Like, if I never see a book, it'll be too soon. And now, when you put yourself in a position where, you know, it's fun because we've created communities and we've gotten to know people and you want to engage in those buddy reads and you want to have those conversations with people, but it can be very demoralizing, like Yolanda said, when you log in and you feel like you're failing at something that isn't a job, you're not getting graded at the end of that, you're not, you know, your life isn't dependent on hitting that goal. It feels really monumental if you do, but it's not the be all end all of your person. And I think a lot of the time we kind of conflate our community booktube with our personal goals that we're inflicting upon ourselves, which is a lot harsher than what people are gonna be expecting.
Of course. But it's also like for me this year, it's been nice to experiment and like try it out. But I know it's not really for me, you know, like not all of it. Like I still like doing buddy reads. I like reading books with people. I think just setting the expectations for yourself like because you have a channel or you just want to read a certain amount. I think that is not for me. So like, I'm a very laid back person. I don't take myself very seriously, but
I never would
randomly,
have got that vibe from you, Carlos.
yeah, I know. I give off the serious vibe. But like, I found that this year I was taking it fucking seriously, and I'm like, where is this coming from? What is going on? Did pressure just sort of you put it on yourself because you're like, oh, I'm putting myself out there on the internet. People are going to be mean to me if I don't do this thing.
Right?
So like,
Yeah.
subconsciously, you actually do, regardless of your mindset about it, you will feel that pressure.
Oh,
You know?
100%. Last year, I told my husband for Christmas that I wanted Mistborn, the first trilogy for Christmas. He got it for me. I breezed through it by like January 6th. I was done. And I was like, okay, I'm committed now. It's the year of Sanderson that this campaign is happening. I want to read all of the Cosmere by next Christmas. Like that was my goal. I'm 5 books shy. Like I'm really close. If I really put my mind to it, I could do it. And I'm like, I don't think we're hitting that goal. And part of me is disappointed because I had this like big idea of like, oh, I'm going to do this video where it's like the actual year of Sanderson, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, that can wait. Like you can do it next year. It's not a big deal. No one else cares. You care, but no one else cares. It's just, we start taking it seriously for certain things.
Yeah, and something similar to happened to me of taking it too seriously, and that kind of ties back to kind of like what Yolanda said about putting pressure on yourself because you start a booktube channel. I comfortably read 40 to 60 books a year. When I'm not making myself read books I feel like I have to read, which is exactly what I was doing for booktube. So I think moving forward, I'm thinking about aiming for 40 books next year just because I'm getting busy. But I also like really want to disconnect what I'm reading from what I'm making for YouTube. I'd rather YouTube be more about the stories I love or doing deep dives into certain aspects of things rather than it being tied to my output as a reader.
Yeah.
Also, because again,
I started doing different videos at that point. Like when I was reading stuff that I wasn't as crazy about, I was like, oh, I'll do a book tag that week, or I'll do what trilogies do I think you should read? And just putting out like middle content, basically filler content. But they've ended up being videos that I've really liked doing, you know? So it's like you can, if you want to, like I know some booktubers only do videos on books that they've really liked and they don't want to do negative reviews and stuff like that. Like I don't have that problem. If I really hate a book, I'm like, I'm happy to tell you that I didn't like it. I will never do that for an indie book. I will only do it for a traditionally published book. But you know, you can, if you want to, very much draw that line of this is what I'm going to do for YouTube and this is what I'm not going to do for YouTube, and that's fine. Like no one's going to begrudge you for doing those.
Yeah, I think because like I really enjoy the video essay side of YouTube. So people doing deep dives into like whatever it is they're talking about, SpongeBob. And when I initially started, that's what I wanted to do. But then I kind of got into like this booktube circle, and like we all just talked about what we were reading. I was like, well, I guess that's what we do. And then like I never really enjoyed doing the wrap ups or TBR videos. I always felt like I was doing that because like everyone did it, and I want to be part of the community. And then my other video for the month will be something I want to do. And I just feel like I need to pull back from that mentality entirely.
Yeah. I think it depends how you approach that. Like, I think the wrap-ups are my favorite videos to do because if I'm just having a good time reading in the month, I have absolutely no problem just sitting down randomly, having nothing prepared and just talking about, here's what I read this month. And it's just maybe just how you approach it or how I approach it. I don't know what it is, but even from a non-YouTube perspective, just as a reader, I feel like if you have to force a book to the point where you want to have read this book instead of I want to be reading this book, then you're not really enjoying that book, you know?
Mhm.
and it's okay to stop reading it, you know?
Mhm.
Yep. I also noticed at the beginning of the year where I was hyper focused on hitting that goal that while I was reading a book, I was already planning my next book.
Yeah.
And it takes you so out of the experience of the book that you're in,
Yeah.
which is such a disservice, right? Like, I don't know. I think about some of the reads I read earlier in the year. I'm like, did I actually feel that way about it? Or was I not as engaged as I should have been because I was thinking of, oh, I have to hit that number. I have to read 6 books this month. Because initially that was the goal. I was like $60. So I've got to do 6 books a month. You know, which just isn't feasible. And like part of me simultaneously while we're having this conversation has already been thinking about next year where I'm like, oh, well, I won't be reading like 4 Stormlight books. So that's, 4 chunky books that I won't be reading. So how many books could I read in its place? And I'm like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like just read stuff that you want to read and don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I think this
'Cause that's
is
what
a
ends up-
good. Go ahead, Yolanda.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that's what ends up putting you in a slump because you're just
Yeah.
not picking up what you want to be picking up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think this is kind of a good segue into the next kind of thing I wanted to talk about. But first, I just want to say hello to everybody that's in the chat. I don't know how people that have like 100 people on their lives can keep up with this. I feel bad. I want to shout out Rogue, Joanna, Dan, Rogier, Shad, Esme, like everybody that's been here and active. Armand, I saw Armand earlier. Thank you guys for being here. I'm trying to keep up with the comments as well as discuss here. But I do want to circle back to because I noticed Laura mentioned Esme's comment earlier, which is kind of what I wanted to talk about. I think the internet has a way of. I'll bring Esme's comment back up. I think the internet. So before I started the channel, I still made general plans, like not TBR videos, but I had loose plans of what I wanted to get to. Mainly, they kind of formed themselves because I was reading authors or reading series and wanted to continue those things. But the thing before I had a channel that I was more okay with was like, so recently I've been mindlessly playing Fortnite with friends or cousins and watching some shows. And now that I have a channel, I don't oftentimes allow myself to do those things without feeling guilt. Like
Yep.
I should be reading, I should be making a video, I should be planning a discussion, I should be this, that, or the other, which that isn't why I created a channel. I don't think that's why any of it. I didn't create a channel to make reading my career. I created a channel to share a passion and share a hobby, and the numbers of how many books I've read and how many videos I've gotten out and how many subscribers or likes or views or whatever, like none of that mattered to me less than a year ago. So why have I let myself fall into at times caring about those things when really ultimately I don't? But they affect me. They affect me negatively, and then I beat myself up, and then I read a couple books in a row that I'm not the happiest about and don't want to talk about, so I don't make videos, and I beat myself up about not making videos, and it's this chain effect that I think kind of put me in a slump.
Yeah.
And the other thing that Esme brought up was something, I can't find the comment now, but I don't think that we should ever feel bad about how we read, whether it's a ton of books. And like Esme said, she felt guilty about talking about, how many books she read. I don't think you should never feel guilty about how many books you read, how many books you don't read, because ultimately I'm not reading for other people. I'm reading for myself. And if I'm not
get caught up in that. I think that's the problem.
Yeah. So I kind of wanted to talk about that because I feel like everything is exponentially. I make it exponentially worse than it really is, because it ultimately doesn't matter. If I don't want to talk about a book I just read, guess what? Then I don't turn my camera on and I don't talk about it, and nobody else cares, like Laura said, except for me.
I think it's in part cyclical because I'm someone that's very achievement focused. Like I thrive with getting achievements. Like in World of Warcraft, like I collected all the achievements. Like that's my personality. So looking at subscriber counts, for example, and your earn watch hours, like I check that because for me, I like knowing that work I'm doing is paying off and trending in the right direction. And initially, this is something we would talk about like in our little admin channel or whatever. We'd be like, oh, I'm about to hit like 380 subscribers, and then you'd lose 5. And you're like, well, crap. Like, there goes that. And even though in the grand scheme of things, it really doesn't mean a whole lot, it's because you feel like the work you're doing is valuable. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I feel like it can become problematic where if we get into a cycle of reading things that we're not super engaged with, we're not seeing the type of engagement on videos necessarily that like maybe we're hoping that we would get due to the amount of work that goes into it. Because I think sometimes on the internet, people just think like, oh, you press record and that's the end of it. Like it's not, you know, for most people, it's setting up your camera, setting up lighting, it's recording, it's editing, it's getting clips, it's doing all kinds of stuff. Like a video could take anywhere from half an hour to 10 hours to edit. And people just don't know the back end stuff that goes into it. So it can be deflating on all these different notes for people. And I think when you're trying to do content creation as well as maintain passion for a hobby that is fueling that content creation, it can be very problematic because the two no longer have a distinctive line. They're very blurred.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So for me, that becomes frustrating because it's not like I'm putting out a video and I'm like, oh, I'm hoping that this goes viral. It's like, I hope that my community that I've built on here like appreciates the content that I'm putting out. Like, I just hope that I'm not talking endlessly into a void type thing. And sometimes you'll put out a video that you're really proud of and no one engages with it. And you're like, okay. And then other times you'll put out a video that you feel fine about and it does really well. And that for me kind of makes me wonky with all of that stuff. So
No, I absolutely understand how you feel, Laura, because I'm the same way. No, I don't necessarily have a vision of doing YouTube full time or anything, but I am metric focused. So I'm one of those people, like I upload the video like every 10 minutes, like refreshing the metrics to see what the view count is or seeing if there's comments. But that's kind of what I was getting at when I said I want to separate like what I was actually reading from like the content I'm producing, because content creation is just another one of our hobbies. And I think where it gets toxic is when we relate them so tightly together. So, like I'm trying to write scripts and I'm trying to make specific subjects I want to talk about, and not necessarily all positive. I do have books I want to complain about, but I'm not complaining about them because I just read them. I have a few months to kind of plan and prepare. Because I think the more I can separate the two things, the easier it's going to be for me to enjoy both of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think ultimately it's the same with reading and with like reading goals and channel goals. Like what you were saying about the some videos that you just kind of put out and then suddenly they do really well, and videos that you're really excited about doing and like nobody cares. I think that means that you shouldn't change what you're doing based on that. You should just keep doing both kinds of videos, you know, and some will do well and some won't, but you'll enjoy yourself and you'll still get the reward of some videos doing really well.
Yeah.
And it's the same with books. Like read whatever you want to read. And sometimes you'll want to read a really popular book that other people are going to engage with and that you're going to have a lot of discussion about. And sometimes you're going to want to read a book that nobody knows, that nobody cares about, and that nobody is ever going to read. So like, and that's fine. You just have to.
And you're going to make a video about it, and it will get 25 views, and it will hurt a little, but you'll laugh.
Yeah, that's basically how it is. Like my most watched content is my Wheel of Time content. And like in terms of books that I've read that I really love, it's not Wheel of Time. Like I don't really like Wheel of Time. And I'm like, you know, the irony of this is that of the books I read this year, Wheel of Time is in the bottom half, like probably bottom quarter. And it's my best viewed stuff. I'm like, this is so frustrating. But then simultaneously, like I finished this book the other day and I was like, this is excellent. Everyone should read this. And it has like 90 views. And I'm like, whatever, I'll take it. 90 people go read this book. But you know, it's just
It is funny how that works out. Like I made a video where I spent a week sampling manga for the first time this year. And I had a lot of fun that week. None of it is my favorite stuff that I've read this year. It's not even stuff that I really feel the need to continue talking about either. But it is the most viewed video on the channel.
By far.
It never stops getting comments. All of the comments are really long, people really passionate about it, and I want to
Wow.
engage, but I'm like, I'm probably not going to make another one of these videos. And now I'm at the stage where I'm like, oh, I kind of want to take it down. But yeah, I don't know.
I hear you. How about you, Colin?
So in terms of like, I wanted to kind of touch on this because I think it kind of ties into what I'm going to say. Armand's comment. Sometimes it's also about how much you have read and absorbed from books with your own pace of reading rather than trying to complete a target. So a way that I've kind of, because I enjoy doing TBRs and I enjoy doing wrap-ups, similarly to Laura's comment about being goal-oriented, I feel like for me personally, putting that out publicly and internally making plans to read certain books
Holds you accountable.
holds me accountable, but also forces me to fill that time that I have in the day where there isn't something going on with reading, which is, I'd rather do that than something else that isn't, productive. However, we
Doom
want to spend that.
scrolling.
Doom scrolling, exactly, stuff like that. Like, I'm not saying that watching shows or playing video games is like, I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about, doom scrolling, essentially, stuff like that. And so I think the TBRs help me to stay on task. But one thing that I've personally done to combat that is, and I don't know this, I think I just did this during one of my TBR recordings and didn't plan to do it. But I just started saying, like, these are books that I definitely plan on getting to. And these are books that I hope to get to or will try to read if I have the time, because usually I'll go through these phases where, and this is related to Armand's comment here, I can read 100, 150 pages a day if I'm in the middle of reading books or series that I just love. And it doesn't feel like a chore and it doesn't feel like I'm counting pages at all. I'll just be like, oh, I started on page 200. I'm on 320 now. How did that happen?
Yeah.
And then there's sometimes where I'm reading a book and I'll read 30 pages a day, but I'm still enjoying it. It's just not the kind of book that I want to fly through.
Yep.
And I think that both of those things are okay. So I try to leave myself the space to be like, if I'm only reading 30 pages a day, but I'm still retaining it and I'm still enjoying it and I still want to talk about it, cool. If I'm reading 100 pages a day and I'm still retaining it and still want to talk about it and enjoying it, cool. Like I don't like trying to like say I'm going to try to read 100 pages a day or I'm going to try to read this many books in a month, because what if I'm reading a 500-page book and then a 1,000-page book? And I think, I try to leave my goals there, but a bit open-ended. And in the beginning of my channel, I felt like I had to get a video out as much as I possibly could. Like, I felt like I had to review every book I read or talk about every book I read or tell you guys all my plans, tell you what I read before I started the channel. Like, I had all these ideas. And ultimately, like, I think that my favorite videos to make, which everybody knows get the least amount of views, are specific book or specific series reviews.
Yeah.
And the reason that I like making those, because after this is over, I didn't want to like shoot myself in the foot, but I'm going to eventually be releasing a Tawny Man trilogy review today. And that was my favorite, that series, Fool's Fate, the end of that series, my favorite book I've ever read. And taking the time to create a video helps me to unpack my thoughts, to order things, and it helps me figure out why that book or this author or this series connected with me. And it's funny because there's a couple of my videos, like you guys were talking about the manga video, like my ranked Stephen King video that I recorded so early on my channel on like my phone, it's got probably horrible audio. It just like randomly will catch the algorithm and fly, and there'll be people in my comments agreeing with my list or telling me that my opinion on my list is wrong, even though I say like I've only read 30 books, I have a lot more to read, this is my list. Like, and I still love engaging with those people, but the reviews that I have put out that have 90, 100, 110 views, those comment sections, like those 3-paragraph comments of people that respectfully disagree with me or agree with me, I love so much engaging with that type of content and those type of commenters. And that's why I started the channel, like ultimately, is to talk about why this book made me feel this way, and then hear about why this book made you feel that way, and then we can talk about it. Like, so those are my favorite types of videos to make because of that.
Yeah.
Reviews, I feel like, have the best longevity. Because for the most part, unless it's like a flash in the pan book that's not going to stand the ages, I feel like people will continue to look up reviews. And that's, you know, what a lot of booktubers have said that have been doing it for a long time. They're like, they're my worst performing initially, but over time they become my best performers because of the fact that people always want to engage with that content, which makes perfect sense in my opinion. Like, I feel for the most part, someone might watch your, you know, like my top 5 books of the year thing. They'll watch that once. Like, they're not really gonna go back 2 years later and watch it. Like, they don't care, you know, but they might want to hear what someone thinks of the blade itself 2 years from now. Like, that kind of stuff doesn't change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also love a top 10 though. I love
I
a
do
top
too.
10.
I love the top 10. I'm an easy sell with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm like, you put a number on there and I'm there.
No, I love top 10s, and I still love tier list videos.
Oh, me too.
Great. That's so good.
Yeah,
categorizing things.
Yeah, that's gonna be my coming back to YouTube video, is doing my tier list for the year. So
my favorite part of tier list videos is watching the people tier list rank things live and feeling their internal conflict.
Yes.
Like, they just put this at the top of tier A, and then like didn't realize 7 books down the line, they're like, oh, I forgot about this. Like, this can't be higher than this, but it can't be lower than this. Like, I love watching people go through that in the moment.
I'm not gonna lie. Go ahead.
Sorry, Laura. You go ahead.
Are we both gonna sit here silently now?
You're both so polite.
Carlos, speak. It's fine.
Before we had the channel, you would do book stats and like make a presentation and hook it up to the TV and then present it to me. And we'd like sit down and have a coffee and be like, okay, present to me my own book stats for this year. And like,
that's amazing.
That's so fun. Like, that is fun.
I would do them like it's like a company business review thing. So I'd be like, oh, let's look at diversity and inclusion, you know, and like
let's analyze KPIs for this quarter. You know, you would break it down by quarters.
Yeah. So
I
think
desperately want to see that.
I think for this year, what we're thinking
that has to be a video.
Do that, and we're just gonna record it. So I'm gonna sit in front of the Christmas tree and the TV.
I'm here for this video. Honestly, it sounds great.
But I completely agree on reviews. And what you're saying, Colin, about like the comment sections. Like, I think out of the videos that we've done, one of my favorite comment sections was the review I did about The Darkness That Comes Before by R. Scott Baker. Like, people were agreeing, disagreeing, but being really nice about it and like being really thoughtful and like about what their experience reading it and like engaging with the video. And I still get comments on that, and it's a really interesting way of engaging with books. And it's probably my favorite thing about starting a booktube channel, because before, you're kind of reading more in isolation. Sure, you might be talking to your family, your friends, but they're not reading the same thing as you. So you read something, you enjoy it, you don't enjoy it, but you don't necessarily go deeper on like why and like what is it that I like or don't like. And now I feel like I'm more aware of that just by making myself talk about it and make myself talk about it on camera, trying to make sense of what it is that I'm thinking and saying. So
And
that's
you
really
can
cool.
learn as well, learn things about the book or learn things about yourself and how you respond to whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that's why what I like most about doing YouTube now, because I have a lot of experience screaming into the void or screaming at people that don't listen to me about things that I like. But now that people like interact and like we have a conversation, sometimes my opinion changes. Sometimes it'll add a layer, or even just sitting down for the wrap ups where I don't prepare anything and I just start talking. And then I realize, oh, that's actually what I thought about that book. That's actually a coherent opinion. That's cool. I like those moments of I'm forcing myself to sit down in front of a camera and talk about this thing, and it's actually like you learn as you're going through it what it is you saw in this book. And I think it's a cool addition to the hobby of reading instead of
Yeah.
just screaming
Yeah, I
into a
mean,
void.
it's kind of like your own personal book club, right? Where you can sit down and like I've had both experiences where I've talked through a book and I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I liked this more than I initially thought. And I've also had the reverse reaction where I've been like, oh no, I liked this way less than I initially thought I did. But it's interesting to kind of have that thought process where you can relive a book and see what hits for you, what doesn't hit for you. And then it also impacts your future reading, right? Because you can say, oh, from what I've heard about X book, it hits the similar notes that Y book did, which can be a really good thing or a really bad thing. And I think that can also be really interesting. But it's fun to have that engagement back and forth with people, like in your comment section and stuff. But I mean, you'll sometimes get like I was complaining to Joanna a couple days ago. I had someone telling me like I was wrong in my comments the other day, and I was like, I'm really not. But like, it's just one of those things where, you have people that feel like they must tell you why you are wrong and all the ways in which you're wrong. And you're like, all right, I'm glad this was a fun way for you to spend your time. But then on the flip side, you can get people that are really community driven and want to engage with you and then come back to your videos and engage with you more, which is really, really fun.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, I
very
think,
insightful. A lot of people are super insightful
Mhm.
with what they see in a book that you might have missed, or I am very happy to be told that my opinion is shit. And here's
If
why.
you're backing it up.
Yeah, show me the receipts. Tell me why.
That's the
Anyway,
thing.
one of the,
I'm not quoting my opinion. I'm quoting fact that people like to tell me I'm wrong on. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, this is like a documented fact. But that's fine. Carry on.
I mean, we're putting ourselves out in the public sphere, so I guess we have to assume
It's
some of
gonna
that.
happen.
I mean, I have honestly like so far the only video that really has like got dislikes and people like telling me I'm wrong is my Stephen King like ranking list, which is the one that I'm like, this is literally my opinion. But I also am well aware that I am not any type of arbiter of what is objectively good.
of course.
Like,
Yeah.
I am not a scholar.
Yeah.
I am not like I did not go to school for this. I am not a book reviewer. I do not get paid professionally to do this.
Even if you
And
did,
guess what?
it
I make a
doesn't
lot of
matter.
hyperbolic statements. Like, I will make hyperbolic statements in the moment because that is how I feel. Like,
Yeah.
Fool's Fate
Honest.
right now is my favorite book that I have ever read, ever, up until this point. 2 months from now, that might change, but that doesn't invalidate the feeling that I felt when I closed the cover of that book. And it's kind of similar to what Laura was saying. Like, that is exactly, truthfully, how I felt at that time. And that will be a cool thing to go back to and be like, that's where I was in my reading journey at that point.
Yeah.
Like, I really thought this was the best author I've ever read, and at the time,
Yep.
it was. This is the author that connected with me the most at this point in my life. Like, for what reasons? Well, when I go through my review and try to plan out how I'm going to talk about this book, usually those reasons start to reveal themselves. I'm like, oh, this is why I felt this way and so strongly about this, and oh, okay, that's why this book's connecting with me so much. Maybe I will like something like this because now I've pinpointed why this book's connecting with me. Where when I wasn't talking about this stuff, I wasn't discovering that stuff. I would just be like, oh, this is awesome, or oh, I don't like this. I wasn't really analyzing or even trying to figure out why I wasn't or was connecting to a book.
And there is no right or wrong way to analyze a book. Like,
Nope.
you know, even with professional literary criticism. Thanks, Dan. Even if, you know, you look at professional literary criticism, that is looking at a book from a very, very specific lens that you study for. But even within those circles, there are people that look at things differently. So
100%. Like,
you know,
my mother-in-law is a former English teacher and taught English in high school in the United States and loves John Steinbeck because he's classified as like a classic American writer. I loathe John Steinbeck. Like, you know,
I like John
someone
Steinbeck.
telling me you like him or you don't like him.
I like him. Your opinion is wrong, Laura.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I about
That's
passed
it.
out,
I'm
Laura.
like, he's, you know, people claim he is, you know, a classic writer. His stuff is all great. And I'm like, it's not great for everybody. You know, the same way that I really love Sanderson, my husband does not. And I know like Caleb and Christopher Nava read Mistborn this year. It didn't hit for them in the same way that it did for me and it has for other people. That doesn't mean that their opinion's wrong. You know, it does not matter if you are a professional critique or like, you know, you want to criticize books or whatever, or if you love them, everyone's entitled to that opinion. It's the same with art, right? Like someone can look at a Jackson Pollock and go, that literally is just paint spilled on a canvas. And then another person can look at that and go, that's a masterpiece that you can't recreate. And both opinions are valid.
Picasso is shy.
How dare you?
Also,
yeah,
I was gonna say. Oh, sorry.
Rogue
Oh.
is right.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah,
Rogue is
Rogue is
correct.
always right. Go ahead, Caleb.
Oh, I was just gonna say I have kind of struggled doing reviews on my channel. I think sometimes I just get kind of like hung up in my head. I'm like, I'm afraid I won't articulate this correctly, or maybe I do have the wrong opinion on this book. And I also really struggle because I feel like I have to give it some sort of numeric value. But moving forward, I have plans to do review-ish things. I wanted to say, is this book worth reading? And then I will say a list of things that's good about it, a list of things that's not good, and then like a vague conclusion.
I've had, problems with giving my full opinion on certain books because, like, the example I'm going to give is Kaladin in Stormlight Archive. Like, I have a lot of issues with the way that Kaladin is written, but a lot of people really resonate with the way Kaladin is written because they praise Sanderson for tackling mental health in that book. And I'm like, I am not going to say a singular thing about this because it resonates with a ton of people, and I'm happy that it has resonated with them, even if it's a miss for me. So it can be hard too when you're like censoring yourself slightly in your reviews. So that's something I've struggled with in terms of reviews a little bit, just where I'm like, I'm giving 90% of my opinion basically, but I'm not giving the full thing.
Yeah, and like I struggle because I want my YouTube channel to be like a mostly positive place, but I also I really get passionate about talking about things I don't like about things. So it's kind of striking that right chord because like I want to be able to critique things and like be constructive, like because I don't just want to shit on everything. But I also don't want to like turn people away. Like I'd rather them just kind of like hear me out on why something does or doesn't work for me, or why it probably doesn't really work at all.
Yeah.
I think something that I've like personally kind of adopted is at least when I'm reviewing things, I'll try to, if I'm doing a dedicated review, give a objective summary in a non-spoiler way of what this book is about. And then I make sure to say, like, because this is going to happen with the Tawny Man. Tawny Man Trilogy's review is going to be the first video review for a book that is pretty much me ranting and sorting out my thoughts on camera. Like, there's like maybe a 6 or 7 minutes where I'm just like, talking about what the Realm of the Elderlings has meant to me up until this point, and then I say, like, if you haven't read The Tawny Man, this is what it's about, and that's like 2 minutes, and then there's like 20 minutes of me just like working through my emotions of like what I just went
I
through.
like that.
That sounds
All
great.
of that,
Yeah,
all of
that's
that
perfect.
is literally subjective. Like,
Mhm.
but somebody that doesn't like Tawny Man or doesn't like Robin Hobb may watch that and be like, these are all the reasons I probably won't connect with this and therefore will not start a 2,000-page trilogy. Thank you, Colin.
Mm.
Also, somebody might be like, this sounds awesome. Sounds up my alley. Like, I think that being genuine, whether you like something or not, now that we have channels and we've kind of created a brand of
Yeah.
what we like, and we're sharing that with people that people come back to, like Laura was saying, like they might know Laura just read a book, she didn't like it. I might not like that book because I usually like what Laura likes or don't like what Laura doesn't like.
Yep.
I think just being genuine is probably the best thing, because it's okay to not like something, and it's also okay to absolutely love something or fall somewhere in between.
hmm
Mhm.
I definitely have that with certain booktubers when I started watching them, and now I have the ones that I'm like, we very much align, and other ones where I'm like, I appreciate your content, but you and I do not like the same book, and that's fine. That's totally fine.
I like listening to those channels because I think that's
Mhm.
kind of for me that's important as well. Is
Mhm.
Dan, I love you. The important thing for me is like recognizing how people see or talk about a book, and if I learn to recognize what it is that person is seeing in books, even if sometimes they don't even really know themselves, or like you can still see where their mind is working, and I just like that. It's more honest, it's more genuine, it doesn't have a weighty pretentious feel to it. I like it. It's more down to earth, which I think I try to be, even though I like pretentious things. But I wanted to mention, going back to Slumps again with Colin, after reading like your favorite book of all time, that is also okay to then slump after that and just be
Yep.
like, you know what, I'm gonna sit in this feeling for a while
Yeah.
because
People
that is
warned me that that would happen, and I
yeah.
didn't realize that that's what was happening. Like,
Yeah.
literally, Derry from Derry's Read It Before told me, like, be ready to just chill after you finish this. And I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. And then I was
Yeah.
like, why am I not enjoying anything? And then Ben was like, dude, you just read your favorite book you ever read. Like, you're
Yeah.
probably that's why or something. And I was
Yeah.
like, nah, I don't accept that. I can't be
Yeah.
right.
I find
you're
it
probably
usually
right.
I go back and I reread a favorite book, like another favorite book, because it's like, oh, I can live in that joy for a while longer with knowing I'm gonna like my next read, rather than picking something up that I'm like, it's not living up.
Yeah. That's what I like. I was literally saying before we started this call to Carlos that I have had a reading slump after finishing every single Robin Hobb trilogy that I've
Mm.
read so far, because I love them so much that afterwards I'm not interested in anything else. And then I was thinking about it, and in the past, like I read Live Ship and Tawny Man last year, and we didn't have a channel yet, but we were already engaging with BookTube, and like the TBR was growing and growing and growing. And in the past, me reading Live Ship Traders in like 2018, for example, I would have finished Ship of Destiny and gone straight back into Ship of Magic and read them all again, because I just wanted to keep going in that feeling. But last year I forced myself to keep going, because you need to keep going, you need to read more, you need to hit your goal or whatever. And sometimes, yeah, when you've read your favorite book ever, you just need to either reread it or reread another favorite, or just stop for a week or however long it takes and
Yeah.
just digest it and watch people discussing it on YouTube for hours and hours.
It was-
Yeah, I love
actually
that.
part of the problem actually with doing the when we did the month of Jimmy, there were 2 books in that month that I was like, holy shit, these might be 2 of my favorite books I've ever read, but I need to go and read this other one because we're doing the month of Jimmy and we need to do And I didn't actually have a moment where I was sitting on those 2 books, and I'm like, I kind of regret it slightly. I don't regret it because I still enjoyed everything else, but in October and November I have struggled. I've been up and down and blah blah blah. But George has helped. Clash of Kings was a big help.
My
I,
favorite, so good.
Yeah.
I haven't finished the Farseer trilogy yet, but I very much felt that way after reading Assassin's Apprentice. I read Assassin's Apprentice and closed the book. I was like, well, that was definitely the best book I've read all year. Probably one of my favorite books ever. And then ever since then, it's just been kind of a hurdle to get into the next read. I read some other really good books this year, but I really like Assassin's Apprentice a lot. And I went through something similar last year when I finished Jade Legacy. Jade Legacy is hands down one of my favorite books. And after that, I finished that book in August of last year, and the only other book I read the whole year was The Eye of the World. Because The Eye of the World takes forever to read. But I really just couldn't find the same enjoyment as I found in the Greenbone Saga, which I read back to back, and that's something I almost never do, is read trilogies back to back.
Oh, I do. If they're all available, I'm like, give them to me.
I don't do that.
No, I can't. I'm like, I'm usually like, that was a good book. I'll read the other one after I read these 3 other books.
Yep, that's me.
I read all 4 books of Mistborn Era 2 in September, back to back. I was like, yep, I'm going to just do it all. And I was happy.
That's so intense.
I loved
it.
Mm.
But I'm actually thinking about tackling trilogies more in chunks like that all at once, because I'm having a hard time going back and actually finishing anything. Bringing it back to BookTube. Tori Talks had a video 2 months ago, I think, where she was talking about how she wants to re-gear her channel because she herself, and she feels a lot of other booktubers, kind of sample a lot of series, but so few of them actually finish anything. And I want to finish stuff.
I'm rereading.
I've always read like that. Sorry, Laura.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that, like, I have always read like that, but I am more used to reading books as just standalone books. Like, I'm gonna read this book, and then moving on to another thing that interests me, and sure, eventually I'll finish that series. And if I want to read it back to back, I might. Even some of my favorite series, I did not read them all back to back, but I think I am just more used to wanting to read a new voice, a new genre, a new author. I can't read too much of the same thing back to back, unless it's George R. R. Martin. So
I don't know. For me, I just get immersed in a world, and I'm like, oh, if it's available, I want to live in that as long as it's fresh in my mind. So for most of, both Mistborn trilogies, the second era is 4 books. I read them back to back. First Law, the first trilogy, I did back to back books, and I loved it because I'm someone, I'll forget things. And I get really frustrated if I've forgotten something. Like, I'm not a note taker when I read. I am just super immersed in the series that I'm in. I've started taking a few like highlighted things in an ebook if I'm doing a buddy read, because then that way I have talking points. But if it's just for me, I'm like fully engrossed in what I'm reading. So if I can retain as much information from each book, that to me enriches my experience more than going and coming back, unless I didn't love the first book. Like, I read Way of Kings in February or March of this year and didn't come back to Words of Radiance until last month. So sometimes there's gaps. And then there are times when I was reading that book, I was like, shit, like, I feel like I should remember what this is. Even though when books are published, it's not like they're being published together. Like, they're meant to have gaps in between them. I don't know. It's kind of like binging a TV show or a movie. Like, I like to have all the information fresh in my brain and carry myself through until I get to the end.
That is exactly how my brain works.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I just want to point out a very objective fallacy here, because Rogue said that his book opinions are correct, and then proceeded to say Farseer is great until Assassin's Quest, which is just wrong. because that's the best book in the series.
I
But
haven't
no, on
read
a
it.
real note, on a real note, Rogue, you fall more into the line of how most people feel about that, I think. You know what broke me out of my slump that I was fighting against for so long, because I felt like, and this is where the internal conflict of things kind of messes with me. I genuinely wanted to celebrate horror spooky season by reading horror books. And I genuinely, for a long time, have planned to do that by reading some horror authors that aren't Stephen King, because I've mainly read a lot of Stephen King horror and not a ton of other authors. And so I tried that, and I enjoyed some of the books I was listening to. Imaginary Friend, I did not. It just didn't work for me, and I really wanted it to for a long time, so I fought against that. What got me out of my slump was picking up the Rain Mouse Chronicles, because I think my heart just wanted to go back to Hobb, because that's just where I am right now.
Yeah.
And I fought that for a while. And I didn't fight it because I didn't want to. Like, I genuinely wanted to read horror. I just couldn't get into it at that time. And I didn't realize how much I wanted to read Hobb until I just picked up a Hobb book and read 70 pages of it like it was nothing. I didn't feel like I was fighting anything. I was fully immersed. And I was just like, you know what, whatever. This is where I'm at right now. This is what's going to get me out of the slump.
I'm a firm believer that books can come to you at the wrong time, and it doesn't make them a bad book. It's just not the book for you in that moment. And that has, like, without a doubt, been Cersei for me. I was given Cersei, or told to read Cersei, right after I finished my master's. And I was like, no, like, I started it and got in, I think, like 100, not even 100 pages, like 50 pages or so. And I was like, this is not clicking for me. Like, I need a break from this world and reading in general. And then I read it this year, and it's one of my top books ever, like, not just of the year, but ever. And I'm like, that had nothing to do with it being a bad book at that time. I just wasn't in the right headspace to appreciate what that book is. And I feel like that's totally normal. And it's one of those things too, that, like, you don't have to go and read a new book if you want to go reread a favorite book. Like, you don't have to do those things to force yourself to do it, because you can pick up a ton of stuff on a reread that you didn't necessarily pick up on the first read, and re-immerse yourself in a familiar world and just find new joy or constant joy in that. And that's okay. Like, you don't have to constantly be striving for the next thing. The next thing could be something you've experienced before, but it's still great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I reread like nobody's business. Less in the last few years because I'm trying to branch out, but I just can't help myself. Like, last year was probably the year that I've reread the least ever in my life. And this year I've been back to, like, every other month at least I pick up a reread, or I reread on audio, just to have, like, that comforting. Yeah.
I'm doing that next year. Like, I'm already planning to reread books next year that I read this year. Like, Warbreaker, I'm probably going to read in January or February, and I read it in February of last year. And I'm like, I can't wait, because it was so good. And I'm excited to see, because it's one of those things, most fantasy has mystery, right? And all of us here generally read at least a little bit of fantasy. So it's different when you go into a reread where you know what the mystery is, and you can see all the threads that have been woven through the story. And, like, you can make the connections before they happen. So rereading can be such a fun experience.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of the time we downplay the value of rereading, and we should normalize rereading books.
Yeah, rereading is something I never used to do, but something I want to start pursuing. I think I have reread maybe 3 books in my whole life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But the more this is actually Johanna made a video several months ago where she talked about, like, you should reread because you're a different person. You're a different person at different stages of your life. And that book will mean something different to you on that reread. And that's actually what convinced me. I was like, yeah, I probably should start rereading some of the series I used to really love.
Yeah. That's why I'm wanting to reread A Song of Ice and Fire next year, because I read it when I was 20. And I'm like, oh, I'm a mother now. It's been like 12 or 13 years. I'm like, I'm curious to see which POVs resonate with me now versus the ones that resonated with me then. Like, it's just different and it's fun, And, like, there's certain books, like, I think J.K. Rowling is a piece of shit. Like, I'm just going to preface by saying that. But like, The Prisoner of Azkaban is one of my all-time favorite books. Like, I read that book probably about 30 times in the 7th grade. I kept bringing in the same book because I loved it so much. And every time I read it, I found something new. And even as an adult, when I go back to those books, I'm like, there's comfort and joy here. And it's kind of fun to realize that I feel the same way about something that I did when I was 12. You know, versus this like having a different experience where you go in and you go, oh, I feel differently now. Like both can be of value and can be really comforting and just interesting experiences from a reread.
Mhm.
I reread Half-Blood Prince and Deathly Hallows like 6 or 7 times
So good.
for like when I was doing. So there's 2 state exam periods in Ireland, one when you're 15 and one when you're 17, when you're leaving school. And with the state exams at 15, I reread both of them like 6 or 7 times throughout the year, studying for the exams. And then for the ones when I was 17, well, 16-ish, I did the same exact thing. And it was only like 18 months later.
Yeah.
But I was reading those 2 books over and over and over again for like
great
yeah.
choices.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like you're reading. So, who cares? And I mean, it's not even like Neil Gaiman has a book called View from the Cheap Seats where it's essays. And I love Neil Gaiman. Like Neil Gaiman is top 3 authors for me. I love him so much. Like I wrote him not long ago asking him to come on my channel and he very politely declined. But like I was so ecstatic that I even got a response back. Like I was saying to my husband, I was like, Neil Gaiman wrote me. And he has this essay where he talks about the fact that we have an issue societally where we like to attribute intelligence and age and appropriateness to books. And he's like, especially in regards to kids. And he's like, we need to stop doing this because they could be doing something else. So like if a kid wants to pick up, a comic book, or they're like 15 and they want to pick up a comic book, like don't look down upon them for doing that. Like they're reading and that's a positive thing. It's the same thing for rereading. It's like, who cares if you've read that same thing over and over and over? Is it hurting you? No. Is it hurting anybody else? No. Like leave it alone.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's just rereads can be so good.
This is going back a little bit, but I my ADHD brain is connecting all these threads. Carlos mentioned The Half-Blood Prince, which led me to when I read Harry Potter in high school, which leads me to an idea about getting out of slumps or avoiding slumps altogether. Me personally, and I would encourage other readers to maybe care a little less about having books spoiled for you. Because I think we get really hung up on like not wanting to know anything about a book before we go into it. And then we kind of end up forcing ourselves through books we don't like. I found out about, I'm assuming we all know the end of The Half-Blood Prince.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I'm assuming everyone in existence knows that Snape kills on the Dumbledore. Shock. But I knew that going into it. I watched the movie before I read the books. But then I went back and I read them, and they were still excellent because the context is what makes a spoiler like a dramatic scene worth it, not the fact that you didn't know it was going to happen. So I think people get too hung up on like not wanting to know things about books when they really should kind of like read a little bit about what it is about. Mm-hmm. And maybe some of the things that happen in it, because that's going to shape whether or not you're going to enjoy that book. And you can kind of avoid pitfalls or getting stuck in books that you don't like, but you feel like you have to finish.
I so get this because I went into the reading the Cosmere knowing a lot of stuff, which like some people are like, oh no, I don't want to know anything. And I'm like, I've actually had way more fun in my opinion, because I've been able to make connections that maybe you wouldn't be able to do on a first read. Mm-hmm. And part of it, like none of it was intentional. Like I wasn't going out and like seeking spoilers, but like it came up in conversations and stuff. I was like, it's not the end of the world. Like I'm still going to enjoy the book regardless. But like in Mistborn, there was like some stuff that I knew going ahead of time. And I was like, okay, like I don't know how this is going to happen. I don't know what the build up to this event is going to be. Like I haven't read the entire book. And I mean, when you're looking at a spoiler, that's a singular moment in a whole story, right? There is the build to that event, and then there's the fallout from that event that you won't fully appreciate or know until you've actually read the story. So while the little minute detail of the event can be spoiled for you, there's so much more engrossing material that isn't, and it shouldn't deter you from reading that story or experiencing that story, because yeah, it's really, really good. Did he spoil it? I didn't know that.
Classic. Classic.
My brother spoiled it for my mom. Yeah, he went up to her and was like, you know, when Dumbledore dies, and my mom was like, oh, like she hadn't read it yet. And was a little upset.
I think, kind of touching back on what Laura was just saying about the Neil Gaiman essay, my daughter is 8, and we read to her at night. Hi, Kitty. We've read to her at night for years now. Like, I think about 4 years. We read to her almost every night. And then eventually she could start reading by herself. And we had one of her teachers in 1st grade say to not read them, but to be careful with the Junie B. Jones books, because they actually aren't grammatically correct a lot. And they're just learning to read around that age. So she would tell us, it's okay if you're reading these, but it's better if you read with them and you kind of subtly point out, like, this isn't the right way we would say this. This is just how Junie says it, or whatever it may be. But she would read the same Junie B. Jones books again and again and again and again and again. And I was not going to stop her from doing that, because I was just happy that she was reading by herself, like internalizing, like silently reading, which was a big thing, like to learn that skill. And she loves, like, she'll read with emotion, and like I think it kind of touches back to, like, it doesn't matter what we're reading. It's okay to, like, read a heavy, dense thing like R. Scott Baker's The Darkness That Comes Before, or Malazan, or Realm of the Elderlings, or something with, like, you know, like flowery prose. But it's also okay to pick up a 300-page thriller that's just gonna fly with simple declarative sentences and just be fun. Like, it doesn't matter what we're reading, as long as we're reading. And sometimes it takes a book like that to get me out of, like, I don't want to read this heavy, dense thing right now. That doesn't mean I don't want to read. It just means I don't want to read that right now.
Exactly. And I mean, if you don't even want to read, that's okay too. Like we were saying
Right.
earlier, if you want to do something else, I feel like when you're a kid, right, you feel like you have all the time in the world. And when you become an adult, you're like, oh, my time is very limited and I have to prioritize where I put my time. And it can be very demoralizing if you feel like you are not utilizing your time properly. And the guilt can mount. But mental health is important. And if playing a video game that night, or watching a movie, or doing nothing is what's needed at that time, then do that. You know, like sometimes I have found when I'm just like, I do not have the capacity right now to sit with a book in my lap, I pick up my Nintendo Switch remote, I put on an audiobook, and I play Mario Kart, you know, and I'm like, I can do both at the same time and it's fine. Or I can sit here in silence and that's fine too. So yeah, it's just allowing yourself that freedom and space to, like, not feel the pressure that you always have to be doing something. Or if you want to be doing something, you don't have to be doing it to the beat of someone else's drum, like the teacher. Like your daughter can read those books and that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, it's hard not to. We all are able to say, you know, don't compare yourself to other people. Like, you're fine just the way you are. Blah, blah. Like, okay, it's easy to say, but you know, I do find myself, unintentionally, but I think just by the nature of being a human, comparing myself to, like, I don't understand how Mike's Book Reviews puts out 4 videos a week and has been doing it for 5 years. I cannot fathom that. Like, I cannot fathom. He has kids. He's got a job. He goes on vacations. He
Apparently.
doesn't books.
I have no proof of these things. No.
he's the example that I think of, because a lot of times I'll be like, how I feel like I'm so busy and there's no possible way for me to do that. Even if I had the ability to just have a studio completely set up all the time, where all I had to do was come in and click a button and record and edit quickly, and because he doesn't do cuts, so he just talks, and I'm like, well, I don't do that. I literally script out my videos, like, probably to my detriment, because it might even look like I'm reading off of a script sometimes in my videos. I don't know. But actually writing it out helps me like organize my. I don't understand how anybody has that much time. But guess what, Colin? It doesn't matter, because I'm not Mike from Mike's Book Reviews. I'm Colin, and if I want to put a video out every 2 weeks, guess what? That's what I'm doing.
And the way you want to do it, the way it works for you, is absolutely fine for you. And just accepting, look, this is who I am. I am perfectly fine admitting that I will never be as driven a human being as Mike is, and that is absolutely fine by me.
I think few people are, honestly.
You know, I would just get tired. I get tired thinking about doing that much work, and work is stressful enough, and I don't like it. So I'm not going to make myself do that outside of regular work, you know?
Yeah.
But, and that's okay. You know, that's fine.
It needs to be fun. Like, it needs to be enough that you're having a good time. And for some people, that might be 5 videos a week. And for some people, it might be a video every 2 months.
It goes fine. It goes for BookTube and for reading. Like, we do these things because they're fun. If they're not fun, you got to sit down and think about, well, why is this not fun? What is going on? What am I doing to it to skew it in a not fun direction? And it's just sort of understanding yourself. And yeah, like,
well, discovering what you bring to the table too, right? Like, this is something I was talking with Jimmy about last week, in the sense that whenever we're starting BookTube channels now, like, it's not like BookTube is a brand new thing, or that YouTube is this revolutionary thing like it was in 2009. Like, people have their voices for the areas that they want filled for certain things. And like, typically in my mind, I'm like, okay, if someone wants like an in-depth review, they're probably going to go watch Murphy. If they want a video essay, they're going to go to Bookborn. If they want a live, they're going to go to Jimmy. But it's like, just because those things exist doesn't mean that there isn't places for Colin's voice, or Carlos and Yolanda's voice, or Kayla's voice, or Laura's voice. It's finding what it is you bring and what you offer. And that doesn't have to be 5 times a week. It could be once a week, once a month, once a year. Like, it's what you feel you are capable of offering and be willing to offer, right? And you know, part of it, like, when I started, I was like, oh, okay, you know, I'm gonna do a video a week. And then I was like, that might not be realistic all the time. I might be sick. I, you know, have a 17-month-old. I'm like, sometimes life gets in the way and it's exhausting. And then other weeks, like this past week, I got out a few videos in the matter of days. And I'm like, I might not have one out for the rest of the week. I might not have one out for 10 days. I don't know. And that's okay. You know, it all comes down to giving yourself those permissions. But I got the comparison thing, because comparison is the thief of joy in all aspects of life. Like, it's just, we are constantly looking at other people, right? Where it's like, well, so-and-so makes X in their position and I only make this much. So-and-so reads this many books and I only read this much. So-and-so has this many subscribers and this is what I have, but I'm doing the same amount of work, so I should yield the same rewards. And it's hard not to get stuck in those comparisons. But I feel like if that's the mindset that we're going into, you will never find joy in this ever. And I mean, when I started, I was like, if 2 people watch, I'll be happy. And like, if one of them isn't my husband, like, that would be great, you know? Like, really, really nice. And I kind of figured I would just be talking into the void for in this period of time, which a lot of the time I still feel like I am. But I know in each video that I put out that at least 2 or 3 of my regular people are going to be in that comment section. And I'm like, that's cool, you know? And I'm like, and that's maybe not the same group that's on Mike's page. or, you know, anyone else's page, but it's the group that has shown up for me. And I love that. So it's being comfortable in what your space is and trying to separate yourself from that toxicity of comparison, because it really can get quite toxic quite fast.
Also, if you're basing it off numbers, I feel like that would make me anxious. And even like, to go back to the example of the manga video that I made that sort of blew up, it kind of made me anxious. And I was like, I don't want this level of attention. Hello, Kat. Bye, Kat.
We've got 5 of them. You're going to be wandering in and out.
But part of me is like, yeah, I think I would be very, very happy with a small channel, like, and just like remain small, and that is fine. And if it gets to the point where, like, I actually don't think that I would be able to do what Mike does psychologically. I'd be like, no, there's too many people. This is way too many people knowing the shite that comes out of my mouth. That's not.
It's very overwhelming.
Yeah, it is overwhelming.
It is very overwhelming. And like, I've seen a lot of booktubers that are like, you know, initially I would answer every comment, and now I just don't even really engage with the comment section. I'm like, that's kind of a bummer, because that's why we kind of started doing this, right? Was to meet people and engage with people and find people that want to talk about the same things that you want to talk about, as opposed to just pumping out content as the machine would. It's just not, for me, what I would necessarily want. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I definitely would like to see my channel continue to grow, but that doesn't mean that I'm looking at like 100K and being like, that's what I want. It's, you know, I would like to see appropriate growth, I guess, is like the only way that I could label it. It's just like, you know, for the work that you feel you put in, it's nice to feel some appreciation and validation for that. So yeah, but comparison is really hard.
Yeah, I really struggle with the comparison. I also struggle with, and this can apply to reading, YouTube, writing, and, you know, anything you do, is you're your worst critic. Like, I get such anxiety about posting videos because I feel like the videos aren't good enough, or they're not exactly the way I wanted them to be. So I just end up not posting anything or not making anything.
Yeah.
Or I don't read or I don't write. And I think we all can just, the ambiguous all, we can just do better about giving ourselves a little grace and just finding what we actually enjoy in things, and just getting a little better in like clear, easy steps. So
yeah, I guess to kind of bring it back to the slump talk again, this is Mike here. So hi, Mike. He said he's in the middle of a month-long writing slump, and you know, the reason that I kind of generically titled this "Let's Talk About Slumps" is because part of the reason that I've been sharing in the admin and in our Discord and in other Discords is I just kind of felt like for a while, like probably for like a month and a half, almost 2 months, I felt like I was just generally in a life slump. Like, I was bummed. I kept saying I was like really nappy. Like, I'm not a guy that takes naps, but I was taking naps. I was procrastinating and getting school assignments done like at the last possible hour. I was feeling like not giving my full effort to things. I was just generally unmotivated, and it was such a opposite feeling to like the pre-wedding, where I was just so engaged in every aspect of my life, because I felt like I was so busy that if one thing fell out of place, everything would fall out of place. Like, if I didn't get this thing done that I had planned to get done in the allotted amount of time, that it would throw the next thing that I had to get done in the allotted amount of time off, and then it would throw the next thing off, and then the next thing. So I was just like, boom, got to get this done, boom, got to get this done, boom, and then all of a sudden, all that stopped. And then I was like, I've got time to do this, I've got time to do that, and then nothing was getting done because I wasn't like scheduled. And it was, I think, like all of that and the emotional high, obviously, of the wedding and just kind of ending abruptly, I think threw me into that, and I wasn't giving myself grace. I was saying things like, what's wrong with you? Why are you acting like this? What am I doing wrong? am I not enjoying this anymore? None of that's true. It just
Mhm.
was okay to not be feeling okay. And
Well,
I
it's like when
eventually accepted that.
it's like when people get sick at the end of the term, right? Like they're in go, go, go mode during finals, and then you have that crash as soon as your last exam is done. And it's because your body is just running on such adrenaline that it doesn't know how to do anything else until you allow it that second to breathe. And it's like, well, get ready. And then
Yeah.
you just crash. But I mean, in terms of just like life things, moving or buying a home or, you know, an apartment or whatever, having children and getting married, like that's the big adrenaline pushers of life. Like it's no wonder you went through a slump after a wedding where from
Mhm.
what you were telling us, you like did a lot of the planning and stuff yourselves despite having help that seemed like it wasn't they didn't know what they were doing a lot of the time type thing. So yeah, it's incredibly stressful. And not only that, but like everyday life can be really stressful. So when you top on a really big mega event, that's not going to leave lots of energy for the things that you want to do. And I feel like sometimes when we're in that headspace, all the things around us become kind of, I don't want to use the word tainted, but like it just kind of seeps into those activities. So things that normally make us quite happy might not for a time period because we just don't know how to disconnect what's going on.
Yeah.
And again, that's okay. Like it might suck when you're in the moment, but you're allowed to have that time.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that too is I think a lot of us, definitely myself included, because what happened to me is I don't think we give ourselves enough time to actually rest. And we conflate a lot of things with what is rest. So like for me, I was like, well, yeah, I'm resting when I'm reading because I enjoy reading. But when my reading is tied to my YouTube content creation or just everything else where I feel like it's something I have to do, it's not relaxing. Sometimes you just gotta take naps, Colin. And you gotta give yourself actual rest. Like there are days like because I used to be really bad about it, but like now I have like one day a week at least where like I just spend half the day in bed doing nothing.
That
Because I
sounds
have
awesome.
because I have to have that. So and like obviously you have to organize that around your life because like my wife and I have to like schedule, hey, when's our time to lay in bed?
Yeah. But there's definitely time periods where like we each go through these things, right? Like this past week, I called my mom because she's up in Canada and I was like, I need you to come visit me and help me. Like I'm overwhelmed right now because I can't get work done because my kid is refusing to sleep, which has meant that I can't read, I can't write, like I can't do the things that I want to do. My cats are getting hungry if you can't hear them. And you know, we can get very overwhelmed by life and then that can force slumps to happen. Like it's not an intentional slump sometimes, but it's like I literally haven't been able to sit down and write for the last 10 days or so because of the fact that since daylight savings time, my kid won't nap. And that's the time that used to be my writing time because by the end of the day, I'm just fried. And at that point, I'm typing gibberish and I'm like, this isn't good. So what used to be my time is no longer my time. And then by the end of the day, I'm too tired to pick up a book and read and retain the information. So like sometimes slumps can be due to circumstances that are within our control. And sometimes it can be due to circumstances that are completely without, like not due to our control.
Yeah.
And yeah.
It's a time then to just sort of reset. And if you're feeling like low mental health wise because of things that are out of your control, realizing that, well, the only thing I can control is then how I feel about this. And just getting to that point will take some time, but it's okay. Like it's fine to take that time to get to that point, you know? And you can experiment with a bunch of different shit and find, okay, this is making me comfortable while I'm in this time period.
Yeah.
Like I just want to sit on the sofa with a blanket and a cat and stare into space.
Just like the cat. 100%. All right, guys. I do have to run though because my kid is now up from her 40-minute nap. And I need to feed the insanity that is now running around my house and around me. So
Good
you guys
luck.
want to keep talking, go ahead, but I'm gonna bow out now. So it was really fun chatting with you guys.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
Bye,
See you,
all.
Laura.
Bye, Laura.
Bye.
That kind of segues into me saying, is there anything else you guys want to talk about? We have been on for an hour and 40 minutes. Oh, I didn't really have much of a plan with this. I just kind of figured we'll roll with it, and whatever happens, happens. But you know, I don't want to get to the point where we're kind of like talking in circles. Unless you guys have some more topics you want to bring up, I feel like we've kind of.
If you want to wrap it up on something cool, each person off the top of your head pick one book that you would consider a slump buster.
Cue in 5 minutes of silence.
Yeah. Only we
Boy, gotta think about it
right now.
Yeah, let me consult my Kindle.
Elevator music plays in the background. Just imagine it.
I think because I read so many different genres, I think probably a good slump buster for me is just switching genres, because sometimes I'm just burnt out when I'm reading, because I will just do it all at once. Like, I'm just reading horror for 3 months, and like I need to change that. So I think that would depend. I think Stephen King largely is a good slump buster, because most of his books are good, at least compelling. I think a good slump buster is Misery, because it's a fast read. It's everything he does well and almost nothing he does bad.
Cool pick.
You are literally not going to believe me when I say this, but that is what I mentally had settled on, that exact book.
Nice.
And then you said it.
Okay,
So I will
so
switch
take
to
anything
Rogue's
from
answer.
this. Go read Misery.
Dresden Files. That would be my second choice. They're easy reads. They're quick.
Mm-hmm.
And they're engaging. They're fun, and they're serial. So like when you finish one, you don't feel like you've got to get to the next one. It's just like, all right, I'll read that.
Sometimes
easy.
I find actually a good slump buster for me, similar to what Caleb said, I switch genres. I need to switch up a genre. But a good thing for me actually is picking up some kind of just general fiction. Doesn't have to be like literary leaning, but some book about whatever. I don't even know really what it's about. Make it short, 300 pages, hopefully well written, but like pick something like that you don't necessarily know what you're getting yourself into, and it's a fast read. Something like The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. You kind of know what you're getting yourself into, I guess, with the title, but reading a book like that's 300 pages, it's well written.
It's split into 7 parts of The Seven Husbands, so it's like,
yeah,
next part like every 50 pages, and
yeah. And it's not necessarily about anything specific. It's just sort of about life or whatever. And it's not tied to a specific genre. So you're not looking for those general conventions. I think those are good slump busters for me.
I think, kind of to add to that, I think also reading several novellas in a row. So not just one novella, like read 3 or 4 in a row. Because I think part of being in a slump too is that sense of momentum.
Yeah.
So like if you read one, you're like, hey, I got that done pretty quickly, and then you read 2 or 3, and you're like, okay, I'm rolling again, and then you just get right back into whatever 12-book series you're reading.
Yeah, or read something short with like a satisfying structure, like Agatha Christie. You know?
No, that was mine.
Okay. What was your suggestion?
Well, you're going to be shocked by this one. No, yes to everything that has been said. But yeah, I was just going to say for me, it's usually something short and instantly engaging. And a really good murder mystery just has that thing of who did it? I want to know who did it. I'm going to keep turning the page because I want to know who did it. And Agatha Christie is a really good one because they're all short as well. I read And Then There Were None last month. on like a 3-hour plane ride. I was not expecting that to happen. I thought it was going to last me like for the trip back, but it was just so compelling, and there's no fat on her books. It's just exactly what it needs to be. When you get a bad
I
murder
have
mystery,
never read Agatha Christie.
this was
Neither
my
have I.
first one. Do it.
Never.
Do it.
Do it.
I have.
It-
Let's see what I have.
It's worth the hype and the fame of her name. Like this was my first one, and I would say start with that one. It's a great one.
She's great.
Oh, that's a
Oh,
very nice
nice.
addition.
That's
Yeah.
cool. That's a very cool addition.
Is that the Barnes and Noble edition?
That's the Barnes and Noble one, yeah.
Mm.
Nice.
They have like these seasons editions for her where they have short stories compiled, but like themed to what would be appropriate for a different season. So like there's an Autumn Chills one, and it's like supernatural murder mysteries and stuff like that. And then there's a winter one that are like, I think it's called Murder something Christmas Pudding. I don't remember how those words go together, but they go together. And they're like Christmas themed. So like, and they sell them in a box set, and I'm thinking about getting that because I think like those little short stories might be good. And they're very pretty. Anyway,
Nice.
yeah.
Nice.
I think another suggestion too for slump busting is reading IP fiction. So if there's some IP that you really like I'm big into Warhammer, and I feel like I'm struggling, I'll just read one. It's almost an automatic win.
Great point.
A Star Wars book, a Marvel comic,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Because you already have the connection. You don't have to do the mental work of like getting into the new world and the new characters. Yet you're already in it from the beginning. You're already attached. Yeah.
And again, like if it's something that you love, like again, like the tone, the pace, it's already checking all those boxes. So like it's an instant win.
Yeah. And it doesn't need to be amazing for you to enjoy it.
It just needs to be what you love about that thing. So
yeah.
Well, we got some good slump busting suggestions. I think we're all out of our slumps. I think if we were in one. But yeah, this was a really fun chat. Thank you guys for coming on, and thank everybody in the comment section. I'm sorry I couldn't keep up with everything like I wanted to, but that part of this hosting job is hard.
Yeah, most definitely.
Tough.
But I do appreciate everybody that stopped by, and if you guys want to just briefly let everybody here that's still in the chat know where to find you, you can go ahead and do that, and then we'll wrap things up. So Caleb, where can we find you?
Yeah, you can find me right here on YouTube. That's my name. Celebrity. You can also find me on Instagram and TikTok and Threads, all the same thing. Sometimes it's Celebrity620, but if you type in Celebrity, I'll show up. So I'm on all of the platforms.
Nice. I don't think we are on all of the platforms, and you probably wouldn't find me on most of the platforms, but
we're on this platform.
We're on this platform. StoryTube with a TOOB, and we're on Discord. If any of the Discord servers of even bigger channels will probably pop up in there as well at some point. But yeah, Instagram and all that shit. TikTok, no. Don't look for us there.
But also, you should join our collective Discord. Unexpected Party.
I was gonna say we have an unexpected party. I'm sure Colin will do the linking and the descriptioning and the whatever. But yeah, go join us all there because we are all in that Discord.
Yes, I will add that to the details of this video. I didn't do it in StreamYard, but I will go back and do that. But I want to thank everybody for being here in the chat. Thank you guys again for stopping by and engaging with us. That makes this even more fun. And I hope everyone that's still here is enjoying what they're currently reading. You guys are always welcome in Colin's Corner. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us on, Colin.
See ya.
See ya.